Знаете, здесь нет ничего нового. Ведь и у нас в литературе...
You know, there's nothing new here. In literature and in art, this topic of contradiction of the older generation and the younger generation, of fathers and sons in our classic literature, these images have always existed. Fathers and sons. There is nothing new here. You know what's new? The technology. Those messengers, telegram, and so on. They are used to influence the youth. The younger generation, this generation is more or less the same. Young people are always more mobile, more radical. The younger people, a young person, thinks that they are coming across this injustice and so on, and no one saw it before them. And now they saw it, and they will tell it to everyone around. And they think that these injustices are very easy to deal with. They can be easily solved. And when a person becomes more mature, he or she is trying to change something. It turns out that they start to understand that it's possible to find a solution, but it's not as easy as it seemed at first glance. Therefore, we need to talk with people. We can't just say that you're just young, you don't understand anything, you're just sitting there in your homes. It does not work like that. You need to always keep in touch with young people and to use their tools, their devices of obtaining information, to use feedback, social networks, and so on. You need to work there. And I'm sure that you partly do that. I'd like to wish you every success.
Совсем молодые, вы совсем ничего не понимаете, и вот сидите у себя дома там за стенкой. Так тоже нельзя. Нужно постоянно быть в контакте с молодыми людьми и пользоваться их инструментами, их аппаратом, пользоваться теми же современными средствами доведения информации до них, обратной связи в социальных сетях. Надо там работать. Я так понимаю, что вы отчасти этим и занимаетесь. Хочу вам пожелать успеха.
President Sir, we could have gone on for another hour or so, but we're reaching the fag end of our interaction with you. You just mentioned religion a while ago and the Orthodox Church. A very important aspect. I've traveled to Moscow a few times now, and every time you come here during Christmas, it is unbelievably lit. It's unbelievable to see how beautiful Moscow as a city looks. Anjana's first time. So she was surprised. It's better than any European city. But religion does play a very important role now. How do you see spirituality when it comes to the morality question in leadership, the Russian society, and for you personally?
Ну, это основа. Мы все время, во всяком случае, последнее время, все время обращаемся к нашим традиционным, как мы говорим, ценностям.
Well, that's the foundation. We always turn to our traditional values, as we call them. At least that's what we have been doing lately. This does not mean that we use these traditional values to just sit idly. This is simply the foundation that we feel very solid on. But we need to look forward. Naturally, we need to develop and use all modern means of development. And only with that, using our basic fundamental values and vision of the future, that's the only way to efficiently achieve the goals that we are setting for ourselves. And that's the way we have shaped or formulated our goals, the goals of national development. I would really like our national goals and the goals of India, shaped by Government of India, headed by Prime Minister Modi. I would really hope that they coincide so we could join efforts and achieve maximum results.
Совпадали друг с другом, и чтобы мы, объединяя усилия, добивались максимального результата.
So we welcome you with open hearts to India, and we look forward to whatever comes out of the meetings. But I don't know how much of Hindi films or songs you've ever heard. There's an old song that was very popular in Russia, which actually just means that there's a red cap on the head.
You're wearing a red Russian hat.
A Russian hat, but the heart is Indian. And it was very popular even in Russia. A lot of people knew about it. Anything that you want to say to about India, Indian society, Indian culture, and what is your message to all Indians who like you a lot and who would want to listen to what Mr. Putin has to say to Indians?
Вот вы сейчас сказали об индийской культуре.
You just mentioned the Indian culture and the Russian culture. You know, I think that we have a lot of citizens in the Russian Federation also have a notion of Indian culture as about a fairy tale, a beautiful, bright, colorful fairy tale. From the time of the Soviet Union, people here like Indian movies and Indian music. I would even say that certain known people from Russian society have a cult of the Indian culture, and I like that very much, because I think that it is, as they say, from heart to heart. We'll be doing everything in our power so that this interest would not lose its spark. I would like people in India to know that.
Есть такой даже в известных слоях нашего общества культ индийской культуры. И мне это очень импонирует, мне очень нравится это, потому что это вот то, что называется от сердца к сердцу идет. И мы будем делать все для того, чтобы этот интерес этот не угасал. И хочу, чтобы в Индии об этом знали.
President Putin, we are very thankful to you for this very open interview that we had with you. And the best part, I think, Geeta, out of this entire interview is that we touched everything we talked about, everything. But this is a bond. The Indo-Russian bond is a friendship that is to be cherished forever. There are seasonal friendships, but there are friendships that last a lifetime. It is a classic, vintage, and let's see what comes out of it. We're very thankful to you for this interview.
Well, that's Vladimir Putin for you, a no-holds-barred interview with Archduke and India Today Network, where he summed up what Russia is. He's saying Russia will not be isolated, will not compromise on her interests, and is not going to go kowtow to the developed world, saying we want to be part of any grouping such as the G8. Thank you so much for joining us. India and the world was watching you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
In view of the sanctions by the US, the arm-twisting methods that are being adopted, how do you plan to circumvent all this? Will you pull back or push harder?
Do you want to go back to being a part of the G8? Because that's a lot, there are a lot of reports on that. So is that something that Russia is looking at?
When you met Prime Minister Narendra Modi in SCO, and there was this picture and video of you and him going in a cart, how did it go about? How did it happen? And what did you discuss in the car?
Complicated orchestration just as friends. We got together in one car and we spoke. Along the road, there was always something to talk about.
What are the solid announcements during this visit? And I ask you this is because the world, and you know who I mean, would be watching.
Dear viewers, hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Archduke India Today, and I'm Anjana Om Kashyap, and we're at Kremlin today, and you're about to witness history, a very historic moment. It is said that when two old friends meet, they have their private jokes. They have a lot of banter, they have a lot of fun, and they have a bonhomie or camaraderie. But the others in the room might feel a little uncomfortable. And why do I say this? I say this because as the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, meets Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi, the world will be watching very, very closely. Vladimir Putin is undoubtedly one of the most influential politicians of the world whose decisions don't just affect Russia, but numerous nations across the world. He's a very compelling and enigmatic figure on the world stage. It just doesn't get more exciting than this.
Well, that's right, Anjana. Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan. We have with us a man who is known to be one of the world's longest-serving leaders. He's seen it all, through wars and economic recessions, from disintegration of countries to a changed world order, from Boris Yeltsin to Donald Trump, from Atal Bihari Vajpayee to Mohan Singh to Narendra Modi. He's seen the world change right in front of him, and he's taken Russia through very turbulent times and yet has cemented his position as a force to reckon with. Thank you so much, President, for doing this with us. You're in conversation with India Today and Aaj Tak. That's the President of the Russian Federation for you.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on our network. How are you doing?
Надеюсь, что и вам у нас в России.
Well,
I hope you'll enjoy your stay in Russia.
Москва нравится, Кремль, где мы сейчас с вами работаем.
Hope that you like Moscow and the Kremlin, where we are currently collaborating together.
По плану, в целом мы довольны ситуацией.
As you see, everything is going on as planned. On the whole, we are satisfied with the current economic situation.
Потому что предстоит встреча, как вот
Most importantly, I'm delighted to be meeting, as you've mentioned, my friend Prime Minister Modi.
мы давно договаривались увидеться именно в Индии.
We have made a specific arrangement to do so in India because there are numerous topics on which we need to talk, and our collaboration with India spans an extensive array. And of course, the unique nature of our relationship adds another layer of significance.
Ну и хотел бы сказать, что и путь, который прошла Индия с момента завоевания.
I also want to highlight that India's progress over the past 77 years since gaining independence, an extremely brief span in historical terms, has been substantial indeed, and India has truly come a long way in development.
Скажу, ведь, знаете, когда мы живем в текущей
I will discuss this further below. You know, as we go about our daily lives, we often fail to notice the changes happening right before our eyes. We scarcely ever take note of them.
Если посмотреть чуть-чуть назад, то то что произошло в
Yet, if you glance even slightly into the past and reflect on what has occurred in India, it's almost like a miracle.
Наверное, у вас-то кто знает, что
For example, few people recognize that life expectancy in India has nearly doubled during this period.
We will talk about longevity
Yeah.
in some time from now.
Да, хорошо, поговорим обязательно, но во всяком случае
We will definitely discuss that. Anyway, our relationship with India is advancing in numerous fields. It's a pleasure to meet Prime Minister Modi again, with whom we have both a professional and a personal, friendly relationship.
и личные отношения, дружеские.
Sir, may I ask you, you just talked about the Indo-Russian ties, and it dates back to almost more than 7 decades. Dosti in Hindi and Druzhba in Russian. This friendship dates back to more than 7 decades. My question to you is, how do you assess the strength of this friendship in today's time? And what would you say about Prime Minister Narendra Modi and to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, whom you call your dost?
О премьер-министре мы.
About the Prime Minister.
Yeah?
Ну, вы знаете,
You know, the world is evolving rapidly, and this pace keeps getting faster, which is plainly visible to all.
вот это все видят очень хорошо. Конфигурация.
The global configuration is changing with new centers of power emerging, and the global power landscape is changing too.
Силы в мире происходит.
Therefore, it's crucial to ensure stability among major nations, since this forms the groundwork for gradual progress in both bilateral and international relations.
Она создает определенную базу, основу.
In this context, our collaborative endeavors with Prime Minister Modi carry significant weight because they transcend our mutual ties.
Работа вместе с премьер-министром Моди имеет очень большое значение.
Given its direct relevance to both nations, ensuring stability in key areas of engagement is crucial, as it helps secure the fulfillment of our objectives.
То стабильность в некоторых отраслях взаимодействия.
Prime Minister Modi sets very challenging tasks for the country, and for himself in the first place, then for the administration, and eventually for the nation.
Ставит перед страной и перед собой прежде всего, а потом перед правительством и перед страной.
Take, for example, his famous pitch, Make in India. It has a practical dimension, including for our bilateral relations.
В том числе и в двухсторонних наших отношениях. Мы когда встречаемся, он все время
When we meet, he always says, let's do this, let's do that, let's look at this area and that.
я готов их так, готов буду.
I can list them all.
Поэтому у нас очень много.
Therefore, we have a lot of practical areas of cooperation.
But before Geeta takes on to the next question, one little small, very interesting question, because when you met Prime Minister Narendra Modi in SCO, and there was this picture and video of you and him going in a car, and we're showing it to our viewers right now. You were traveling in a car with him. Was it pre-planned, or how did it go about? How did it happen? And what did you discuss in the car?
Вы знаете, обсуждали текущие вопросы.
We have just gone over the current topics. This wasn't prearranged. We simply stepped out and my car was waiting. I asked, "Would you like to come along?" That's all there's to it. A gesture of human solidarity, camaraderie and friendship. No hidden scheme was involved. We climbed into the car like old friends and talked en route. We always have things to discuss. What's more, we continued our conversation and just remained in the car. Eventually, I suggested, "Let's go. They're already waiting for us." There's nothing special here. It simply indicates that we have matters to discuss, and those matters are very important to us.
Right. President Sir, the fact that you're going to go to India, you just said that both leaders are going to cement the guarantees that you give each other. What are the kind of announcements that we can expect? We've heard about technology transfer, we've heard about trade enhancement. What are the solid announcements during this visit? And I ask you this is because the world, and you know who I mean, would be watching.
The world would be watching our visit. There is no big deal here. India is an enormous country, home to 1.5 billion people, boasting a growing economy with a 7% annual growth rate, leading among major global powers. After all, Mr. Modi has made this possible. It's something both the Indian nation and Prime Minister Modi himself can rightfully claim as their achievement. Naturally, there will always be critics who think that improvements could have been more significant, but that's an achievement. We've laid out an ambitious plan for our collaboration in key domains. The most critical areas are indeed forward-looking. I'm referring specifically to high technology. Our partnership with India encompasses such fields as space exploration, energy, notably nuclear power, exemplified by the prominent Kudankulam nuclear power plant project, shipbuilding, and aviation. There are many interesting areas for cooperation that are looking to the future. Take, for example, artificial intelligence. We'll likely discuss it further down the line. AI represents a crucial technology shaping the future, rapidly transforming the world, amplifying possibilities exponentially while simultaneously presenting certain challenges. There are the matters we will discuss, choosing the ones that are the most significant for us, as both Prime Minister Modi and I believe. That's what we will focus on and what we will work on.
Any specific agreement, sir?
Well, of course. However, perhaps we shouldn't reveal them just yet. We will do that during the visit, when we can unveil everything publicly. Then our colleagues will first share with us all the documents they have prepared, and it would require our final approval.
We'll now come to the energy sector, yeah.
Okay, just talking about sustainability and trade. There's immense pressure on India and on Russia. When it comes to oil, India has suffered in terms of the kind of pressure that we're seeing from West. How can both countries handle this Western pressure and sanctions?
The issue here is that the pressure you have referred to typically involves employing political instruments to influence normal competition. Our energy cooperation with India remains unaffected by current conditions, fleeting political swings, or indeed the tragic events in Ukraine. Regarding hydrocarbons, well before the Ukrainian situation, our business entities had already built a solid and efficient commercial relationship that is based on mutual trust. It's widely known that one of our leading companies acquired an oil refinery in India. This investment represented one of the largest foreign inflows into the Indian economy, totaling more than $20 billion.
иностранных инвестиций.
Our company has been continuously expanding operations of this refinery, working with its partners, and operating successfully year after year.
Компания развивает это предприятие.
As a result, India has become one of the major refined product suppliers to Europe,
Индия стала
not just because it buys our oil with a discount.
европейский рынок. И не только
It took years to achieve and is in no way connected to the current economic environment.
и не имеет отношения к текущей конъюнктуре. Кому-то это стало
Certain actors clearly dislike India's growing role in international markets owing to its ties with Russia.
России. Начали придумывать, как ограничивать.
Consequently, they're seeking means to constrain India's influence for political reasons by imposing artificial obstacles.
Right. Right, President, sir,
That's
we
an
did.
important point to make, but my question to you now would be about defense. And India continues to be the biggest defense buyer, roughly 38% of the market from Russia is bought by India. My question to you, sir, is in view of the sanctions by the US or the tariffs they have laid on India, the arm twisting methods that are being adopted, and I name it's America. How do you plan to circumvent all this? Will you pull back or push harder?
Но мне кажется, что и Индия, и весь мир увидели.
It appears that both India and the world recognize that India cannot continue to be treated the way it was treated 77 years ago. India is a major global player, not a British colony, and everyone must accept this reality. Furthermore, Prime Minister Modi is not someone who succumbs to pressure easily. The Indian people can certainly take pride in their leader. This is absolutely obvious. His stance is unwavering and straightforward without being confrontational. Our goal is not to provoke conflict. Rather, we aim to protect our lawful rights. India does the same. What are the obstacles? Obstacles in settlements. However, over 90% of our transactions are already conducted in national currencies. While some complications arise due to the presence of numerous intermediaries, there are also solutions. We can switch to the existing systems for exchanging electronic messages on financial transactions of the Bank of Russia and of our partners in India. These efforts are ongoing and advancing. Those who attempt to hinder economic ties with third countries ultimately encounter difficulties and suffer losses. I am confident that once this perspective becomes firmly established, such tactics of applying external pressure will fade away.
3 specific questions, sir. Number one, because during Operation Sindoor, the weapons we had acquired from Russia proved very crucial in our victory. And that is why I would like to ask you specifically about S-400, the air defense system, the 5 S-400s that are awaited by when can we expect that? The second question is on S-500, the more advanced air defense system. And the third question, 5th generation fighter jet, Su-57. How are you going to push for this and what's the update, sir?
Вы прямо эксперт.
You seem to be an expert on the issue, as if we're engaged in negotiations on military technical cooperation. If we delve into the substance, India stands out as one of our reliable and privileged partners in this area. We are not merely selling something to India, and India isn't merely buying something from us in the sphere of defense and security. No. It is a different level, a different quality of relations we have with India, and we value this. We see how India values this relationship too. Why? Allow me to emphasize again. We are not simply selling technology, we are sharing it, and it is a very rare thing to see in the sphere of military technical cooperation. It speaks to the level of trust between the two countries and the level of trust between the two peoples, I would put it in this way. We have a broad portfolio indeed, including naval construction, rocket and missile engineering, and aircraft engineering. You have just mentioned the Su-57 aircraft. India operates several other Russian-made aircraft too. And there's the production of armored vehicles. India is manufacturing our renowned T-90 tanks. Trust me when I tell you that these tanks rank among the best in the world. Moreover, the famous BrahMos missile, a joint venture between Russia and India, is manufactured primarily at Indian facilities. Therefore, Prime Minister Modi's Make in India initiative should be implemented in this area as well. The Kalashnikov is certainly an important weapon, but we have been discussing high, one might even say cutting-edge technologies. Given the combat experience in using certain types of weapons, their value has multiplied manifold. Now, Indian military specialists, thanks to their strong ties with our military, understand clearly how and in what circumstances a particular weapon performs best, and where and when it should be deployed. This is an extremely important understanding, which is shared by both the Indian and Russian sides.
Right. President, sir, I have to go back to your oil question because you spoke about strategic autonomy, which is what India has been talking about. Strategic autonomy, decide for India's interests. But has India reduced Russian intake of oil after pressure from the West?
Well, there is a certain decline in overall trade turnover during the first 9 months of this year. This is just a minor adjustment. Overall, our trade turnover stands almost at the same level as before. I can't give you exact monthly figures right now, but trade in petroleum products and crude oil, as well as the production of petroleum products for consumers of oil, Russian oil, is running smoothly in India. I know the sentiment of Russian partners, of Russian companies. They believe their Indian counterparts are reliable and very serious people.
Right. The other important aspect in terms of cooperation between India and Russia is the nuclear front. Russia has been one of the biggest movers when it comes to nuclear facilities in India. Are we looking at important announcements on the nuclear front? Nuclear today is a sensitive issue for Russia.
Yes, of course we have some announcements to make. We are indeed one of the biggest movers, as you have noted. Speaking seriously, we're not movers, we are producers of the world's most advanced and reliable equipment for nuclear power plants. The Russian company Rosatom builds and operates more nuclear reactors for nuclear power plants abroad than any other company in the world. 22 nuclear units. The well-known facility and our joint project, the Kudankulam plant, is one of the leaders in this regard. These are large units. They operate efficiently and, I reiterate, have proven to be very useful. There are some announcements you have just asked about. What is it about? The news is that Russia is probably the only country in the world today capable of building, and actually does build, small nuclear power plants. Such plants are already operational in Russia, and we can make them either floating or ground-based. It's an excellent option for specific regions where big power stations are not needed or where connecting electricity grids between generators and end users isn't feasible. These compact nuclear power modules can thus be deployed in isolated and hard-to-access locations.
That's a lot of collaboration and cooperation. You're talking about made in India, make with Russia. How do you think President Trump's going to react to all of this?
You know, neither me nor Prime Minister Modi despite certain external pressure we face, have ever, and I want to emphasize this, I want you to hear it, approached our collaboration to work against someone. President Trump has his own agenda, his own goals, whereas we focus on ours, not against anyone, but rather aimed at safeguarding our respective interests, India's and Russia's interests. In our dealings, we cause no harm to others, and I believe that leaders from other countries should appreciate this.
President sir, with regard to Mr. Donald Trump, my second question is also about him, because recently he also went on to say that if you're buying oil from Russia, you're the one, about India, you're the one who's funding the Russia-Ukraine war. How would you characterize Mr. Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America?
Вы знаете, я никогда не даю...
You know, I never give character assessments about my colleagues,
Даже тем,
neither those I've worked with in the past, nor current leaders of individual states.
отдельное государство.
These assessments should be made by citizens who vote for their leader during elections.
Лидера в ходе избирательных...
As for India's purchases or purchase of energy resources from Russia, well, I would like to note, and have already mentioned this publicly once, the United States itself still buys nuclear fuel from us for its own nuclear power plants.
Это ведь тоже топливо.
That is also fuel, uranium for the reactors operating in the United States.
Электростанций, работающих в
If the US has the right to buy our fuel, why shouldn't India have the same privilege?
должна быть лишена такого права. Это вопрос...
This question deserves thorough examination, and we stand ready to discuss it,
на этот счет и,
including with President Trump.
But you're being very kind. You're saying you do not characterize Trump, but he certainly does to you. Having said that, he has weaponized tariffs, and he's weaponized it against India. Right now you're engaged, but it's a blow hot, blow cold for India. How do you think the two countries should be handling Donald Trump and the US administration?
Вы знаете, он проводит...
You know, he pursues his own policy, and he has advisors. His decisions aren't made out of thin air.
советники, которые...
He has advisors who believe that implementing such tariff policies, involving the imposition of additional duties on trade partners, ultimately benefits the US economy.
В конечном итоге приносит...
He is acting in good faith, I presume.
Я полагаю, наши...
Our experts believe there are risks involved, but it is the choice of each country and its leadership to decide which economic policy to adopt.
той или иной страны.
We have never engaged in such practices,
Мы этого не делали.
do not do so now, and have no intention of doing so in the future.
И мы надеемся, что
Our economy is open.
все
We hope that, in the end,
нарушения,
all violations of World Trade Organization regulations will be rectified.
Right. President Sir, things have changed a little between US and Russia. The fact that America is engaging you, we would have loved to be a fly on the wall when you were meeting with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. That was an important meeting. Were there red lines that Russia reiterated? What really happened?
It's premature to discuss that now. I doubt it would interest you to hear about it, as it lasted 5 hours. Frankly, even I grew wary of it. 5 hours is too much.
Да,
Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner.
да, а я один, представляете, безобразие какое. Вот. Но если говорить серьезно, то она была очень полезной, потому что то, что нам привезли американские коллеги, было основано так или иначе на наших договоренностях до моей встречи с президентом Трампом на Аляске. Мы так или иначе говорили об этих вопросах на встрече в Анкоридже, но все-таки то, что нам привезли американцы сейчас, этого мы пока не видели, и поэтому нам пришлось пройтись практически по каждому пункту, поэтому и это заняло столько времени. Так что это была, ну, это нужная была беседа, абсолютно конкретная и обстоятельная.
Okay, can I ask this question this way, sir? was there a certain specific point where you disagree? Was there a specific point of disagreement where the versus one was just not going forward?
Да.
Yes, such issues were raised, we discussed them. But this is a complex task and a challenging mission that President Trump took upon himself.
Я говорю без всякой иронии.
Fair enough, I say without irony, because achieving consensus among conflicting parties is no easy task.
Простая задача. Ну, президент Трамп действительно...
But President Trump, truly, I believe, he sincerely tries to do this. We went through each point again, let me reiterate this. Sometimes we said, yes, we can discuss this, but with that one we cannot agree.
Сказать сейчас, что конкретно.
That was how the work proceeded. To say now what exactly doesn't suit us or where we could possibly agree seems premature, since it might disrupt the very mode of operation that President Trump is trying to establish. But that's what they do, shuttle diplomacy. They spoke with Ukrainian representatives, then with Europeans, came here, had another meeting with Ukrainians and Europeans. I think we should engage in this effort rather than obstruct it.
So you're saying the 28-point peace proposal is now not on the table, but there were leaked conversations. It is?
Как раз они и обсуждают.
It is on the table.
Просто они разбили эти 28, потом 27 пунктов на 4 пакета и предложили обсуждать вот эти 4 пакета. Но по сути это те же самые 27 пунктов.
We'll go back to that and try and understand how it's going forward, sir. But what happened in Alaska? You met President Trump, and it was all about the peace deal, right? What happened? Did anything come out of it? Did you actually see a clear and sincere intent?
Да, да.
Yes, there was indeed a sense. No, more than just a sense. I have absolutely no doubt that President Trump had genuine intentions. We won't discuss here what caused them or why they appeared, but they're definitely present. Both the United States and President Trump likely have their own understanding of why this needs to be resolved quickly. Moreover, by the way, on humanitarian grounds too. I truly believe that is one of the motives behind President Trump's actions regarding this matter, because he constantly speaks about his wish to minimize losses, and I'm confident that his sincerity is genuine. He undoubtedly considers these humanitarian concerns when formulating his decisions. However, other factors also come into play: political considerations and economic interests. Therefore, I believe that the US is actively seeking a solution to this problem.
Right, he has spoken about intentions. You're right about that. You know, he's claimed to have ended wars. He's been claiming, much to India's disappointment, that he brought about or brokered a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. And now he's looking at Russia, Ukraine, he's looking at Israel. Do you really think Trump is a peacemaker?
Ну, в случае касающегося ситуации на Украине.
Regarding the situation in Ukraine, yes, let me repeat once again. I am absolutely certain, with no doubt at all, he sincerely aims for a peaceful resolution. Let me stress once again. The United States may have various reasons for this.
И гуманитарного характера, лично для Трампа.
Humanitarian ones, personally for Trump, because he genuinely wants to end hostilities and prevent further loss of life. But there could also be political interests tied to ending the confrontation between Russia and Ukraine.
И экономические тоже. Кстати говоря, в сфере...
Or economic motives too. By the way, they can be in the energy area and in other areas.
Восстановление отношений экономического характера между...
There are numerous areas where restoring economic relations between the US and Russia would benefit both sides. I showed you some letters, I won't go into this right now, large US companies sent to us. We should remember this.
Не забывать о том, что они есть.
Really? Oh.
Of course.
Конечно,
about their existence. They're waiting until all problems are solved and they are ready to return to us. They want this, asking us not to forget about them. The letters are there. What's so surprising about that? Many want to return. So, of course the Indian government is saying, right, why should we leave?
But for Trump to make the bidding is what we were
For
stuck
Trump
at.
to make the bidding, to come with companies, letters from companies, that's a different ballgame altogether.
No, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. We have letters from American companies, letters they have sent us, where they urge us not to forget about their existence. These are our former partners, who did not leave by choice. They express a clear desire to resume cooperation and are waiting, among other things, for a corresponding political signal.
This interview, this conversation is becoming very interesting, sir, because there are so many highlights of understanding, and it's really pleasant to see you and your sense of humor and how you're putting things forth. But now we'll go on to a very serious matter, and that is the Russia-Ukraine war. So what, in your view, would constitute a victory for Russia in the Russia-Ukraine war? What are the red lines? Because you have, and I quote you, you have said very clearly that Russia will lay down arms only if Kiev's troops withdraw from territory claimed by Russia. Which parts would that be?
You know, it's not about victory, like you have said. The point is that Russia is determined, and will certainly do so, to protect its interests, protect its people living there, protect our traditional values, Russian language, and so on. Protection by the way of religion that has been cultivated on these lands for centuries. Yet you know that the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine is almost banned. They seize churches, drive people out of temples, and so on. It is a problem. And I'm not even mentioning the ban on the Russian language and so on. It is all part of a big set of issues. Let me remind you, we were not the ones to start this war. The West egged Ukraine on and supported the events orchestrating a coup d'etat. That was the point that triggered the events in Crimea, followed by developments in southeastern Ukraine, in Donbass. They don't even mention it. We've tried to resolve these issues peacefully for 8 years, signed the Minsk agreements, hoping that they could be resolved through peaceful means. But Western leaders openly admitted later that they never intended to honor those agreements, signing them merely to allow Ukraine to arm itself and continue fighting against us. After 8 years of relentless violence against our citizens of Donbass, something the West hasn't uttered a word about, we were forced to recognize these republics first, and secondly, provide support. Our special military operation isn't the start of a war, but rather an attempt to end one that the West ignited using Ukrainians' nationalists. That's what is really happening right now. That's the crux of the problem. We will finish it when we achieve the goals set at the beginning of the special military operation, when we free these territories. That's all.
So what is that goal? What is the end game for Vladimir Putin in Ukraine?
I have said that already. Listen, we didn't recognize these self-proclaimed republics for 8 years. 8 years. They declared independence while we were trying to establish relations between the rest of Ukraine and those republics. But when we realized this wasn't possible, that they were simply being destroyed, we had no choice but to recognize them. And not just their existence on part of the territory, but within administrative boundaries established during Soviet times, then later under independent Ukraine after its independence, still within those administrative borders.
И мы сразу Украине
And right away we told Ukraine, the Ukrainian troops, people don't want to live with you anymore. They voted in a referendum for independence. Withdraw your troops from there, and there won't be any military actions. No, they chose to fight instead. Now they have pretty much fought themselves into a corner. All this boils down to one thing. Either we take back these territories by force, or eventually Ukrainian troops withdraw and stop killing people there.
Just one last
Right.
question, Geeta, before we move to the other one. Just one last question, sir. March 8, 2014, during the annexation of Crimea, you were addressing the Federation Council, and you said, Kiev is the mother of all Russian cities. What did you mean?
Here I haven't made up anything. Historically, this is how it was said.
исторически. У нас Россия
Originally, the Russian state was formed from several centers. The first capital, according to history, was in Novgorod in the northwest.
по истории. Это была в районе
Later, the federal status moved to the city of Великий Novgorod, and then it moved to Kiev.
как бы государственность, она перетекла в город.
This was ancient Rus. And since then, Kiev has been known as the mother of all Russian cities.
Древняя Русь. И с тех пор Киев и называли мать городов русских.
Later, historical events unfolded in such a way that the ancient Russian state split into two parts.
Русского государства, часть этого
One part began developing with Moscow as its center, while another part fell under other countries. For instance, the part with Kiev, along with some other lands, these parts first formed a state with Lithuania, subsequently merged with Poland, forming the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Thus, this part of the ancient Russian state ended up in Poland, and by the 17th century, it sought to return back to Russia.
веке попросилась назад в Россию.
Right.
Geeta.
President, sir, the fact that, you're mentioning the history, and it brings me to what I did when the conflict was underway. I had traveled to Donetsk, I traveled to Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and most of the people over there are Russian speaking. They speak Russian language. They were very disappointed with Kiev that it was banned in eastern Ukraine. But they were also a little shocked that how is Putin doing this to us? We are his people. A lot of women I spoke to were in shock. So what do you have to say to people in eastern Ukraine who actually have families in Russia, who on a daily basis move from Ukraine to Russia? So what do you have to say to them?
The answer is quite straightforward. These individuals presumably resided in those parts of Ukraine, specifically in the areas of the Lugansk and Donetsk region, that remained under the control of the Kiev authorities at the time. Meanwhile, that part of the Lugansk or Donetsk region outside their control was being subjected to intense military action by the Kiev authorities. We were consequently forced to extend support to those areas that had declared independence. That is the first point. Secondly, we provided people with an opportunity to express their will in an open referendum. Those who believed it was in their interest to join Russia voted accordingly. Those who did not were free to leave unhindered for other parts of the Ukrainian state. We have never placed any obstacles in the way of that choice.
So what do you make of President Zelensky? He was promised NATO. The European Union promised him EU. Nothing really happened. Was NATO ever on the table for Ukraine?
When this gentleman came to power, he declared that he would pursue peace at all costs, using every means possible, without sparing even his career. But now we see things differently. He follows the same pattern as his predecessors, putting the interests of a narrow nationalist group, particularly radical nationalists, ahead of those of the people. Essentially, he is addressing their concerns rather than those of the nation. This regime's mindset truly resembles a neo-Nazi regime, because extreme nationalism and neo-Nazism are almost indistinguishable concepts. Today, undeniably, military action dominates their approach. However, they haven't achieved much success here either. I have already said before that what matters most for them is realizing that the best way to resolve the problems is through peaceful negotiations.
Самое главное для них это осознать, что наилучший способ решения проблем.
And we attempted to negotiate with them back in 2022. What exactly they plan to do remains to be asked from them directly.
А что они там собираются делать, на самом деле, это надо у них спросить.
That'll be interesting to see what they have to say on that and how this peace process goes forward. But sir, you've always said that the eastward expansion of NATO is your real concern. Now, Ukraine hasn't got this NATO membership as of now. My question to you, sir, is NATO expansion the real threat or just a pretext for what you think is a part of Ukraine which is probably you want control over? Or you think that injustice is being done, Russian language is being banned? These were the real issues.
Послушайте,
Listen, NATO is another matter altogether. The Russian language, Russian culture, religion, and even territorial issues. These are very important topics. One subject. NATO is something entirely different.
здесь мы не
We don't demand anything exclusive for ourselves here.
Во-первых, есть общее решение, согласно которым
First of all, there are general agreements that the security of one state cannot be guaranteed by undermining the security of others.
теория не очень понятная.
This idea might seem somewhat obscure, but I'll explain it simply.
Вот говорят, что каждое государство,
Each country, including Ukraine, has the right to choose its own means of defense and ensure its own safety. Correct? Absolutely correct. Do we deny Ukraine this? No. But it's not acceptable if done at Russia's expense. Ukraine believes it would benefit from joining NATO. And we say, that threatens our security. Let's find a way to secure yours without threatening us.
нам угрожать не обеспечит вашу безопасность, но и нам угрожать.
Secondly, we're not asking for anything unusual or unexpected, nothing falling from the sky. We're just insisting on fulfilling the promises already made to us.
Неожиданно и упало с небес. Мы просто настаиваем на том, чтобы были
These
исполнены
weren't
данные
invented
нам
yesterday. They were pledged to Russia back in the 90s. No expansion eastward, this was stated publicly. Since then, several waves of expansion took place, culminating with Ukraine being drawn into NATO.
После этого состоялось несколько волн расширения и добрались к
This completely displeases us and poses a serious threat. Let's remember that NATO is a military-political alliance, and Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, establishing NATO, hasn't been repealed.
статью 5, там никто, по-моему, 5-я статья Вашингтонского договора.
It's a threat to us. Nobody bothers to take us seriously. Lastly, when Ukraine became independent, few people recall this, what was the first document ratifying independence? It was the Declaration of State Sovereignty, Independence of Ukraine.
Это что? Какой документ? Декларация
That forms the foundation of Ukrainian sovereignty and modern statehood.
независимости
And it clearly states that Ukraine is a neutral state.
что Украина – это нейтральное государство.
Was that also the basis for what happened when you decided to annex Crimea, your only warm water port, a very important strategic port for Russia, and then Russia was no longer part of G8. Today, the West claims or says that your actions in the recent past is the reason for, and I quote unquote, the isolation of Russia.
Нам не нужно,
We didn't
нам не
need to
нужно
seize
было
that
получать-
important port
нам
in
не нужно было
Crimea
получать
because it was ours
важный
already.
порт в Крыму, потому что он был наш. Наш военно-морской флот по договору с Украиной
Our navy had been stationed there under the agreement with Ukraine, which is a fact.
это по факту.
After the collapse of the Soviet Union, our fleet remained there regardless. The matter isn't about that, though it's significant, but that's not what we're talking about here. And we did not annex Crimea. I want to emphasize this point. We simply came to help people who didn't want their lives or fate tied to those who staged a coup in Ukraine. They said, hey, nationalist extremists took over in Kiev. Did anyone ask us? Okay, we ended up as part of independent Ukraine after the dissolution of the USSR. So be it. History happened like that. Fine, okay. Now we'll live it that way. But we believe that we exist in the democratic state, and if coups happen here with unknown consequences, then we won't accept that. We don't want to live like that. There was a threat, not just of pressure,